Excuse me. Chad's gonna be working on that room right there, doing the video and stuff that's there out here.
Does it?
So, and that's what I'm trying to go back there.
It's an partner.
So he just asked me, what do you know, that he's back there. We all do.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So how are you?
Active. And that needs to together.
So I know I'm going to go make with Chad. And he asked me, I'll let you all know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Miss Tiffany? Quick resume, just.
They're nice.
He did a good job. But he,
Poetry reading. She's designated. She's also of course, you know, he's a theater person.
we had two advertising periods. One was the thank you.
Two now.
I'll be going to the bathroom now.
No.
For real, for real.
I make that mistake here.
If I drink 2 hours more, I'll be like, where's she at? Let me see.
It's gonna be short today.
If I drink 2, then I'll be like, going back and forth. And I'll be like, what's going on?
Excuse me, sir. Call to order the work session. Mr. Smith is caught in traffic. Will be here just a few minutes late, I believe. Everyone else is here. I'd like to say first, we are going to go over the superintendent's first year evaluation a little bit later in the meeting, but we need to get started on an instrument for next year, and I've asked Mr. Wingate to chair that again, and Mrs. Robinson and I are going to be serving on the committee, but if any of the rest of you would care to serve on that committee, you are more than welcome to do so. Just contact Mr. Wingate, and the three of us would be more than glad to have some help, wouldn't we, Chairman Wingate? So, chairman of that committee, and appreciate that. I will say one other thing before we get started on the policy, that we have, Mrs. Lennon has worked very diligently and done a lot of research, and we very much appreciate the work that she's put into it, and now I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Nakia and Dr. Johnson, thank you very much, and Scott didn't. I guess to get started, first of all, we do have a lot of work to do, and I think we kind of have a good system in place that we're going to start with. And the first thing we have to start with is looking at the laws that have been changed, and that has to be the laws that have been changed, and match them up with our policies, and then change the policies. And there was a little bit of a problem when a TSBA came and spoke with us at the last meeting. I think we all were aware that we were not getting some emails, so we were not being updated as far as what those laws were. And hopefully everybody has been getting emails now from TSBA, and that you all know of the laws that have been changed. And has everybody been getting updates from TSBA? Okay. So those have done, Nakia's looked at those, matched those up with the policies, and sent those to Scott. Scott has looked at those, and those are going to be, I think, presented tonight for maybe a first reading. Is that correct, Nakia? And moving forward with that, Sherry is going to create an Excel document of when we need to look at, of course, first we're gonna look at the policies that need to be changed according to law, when that comes up. Then what we're gonna do next is Sherry's gonna help, and I'm gonna help Sherry. We are gonna create an Excel document and look at when the policies need to be reviewed. It is a daunting task. If any of you all have looked at the policies online, they are all online. They're very hard. I went ahead and made a book because it's hard to pull each one of them up and look at it. I do better looking at them. And the issue date, Sherry brought to my attention is a little bit different than what is listed online. So we're gonna have to go back and look at what the issue date is, and then we're gonna create an Excel spreadsheet. And some policies need to be reviewed September, October, November, December. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna, when they need to be reviewed in September, October, November, December, so forth and so on, then we will meet in those months, and those are the times that we'll review those policies. Some months we're gonna have to look at policies, a lot more policies than others. So we may have to have a few more meetings. And sometimes when the laws are changed and TSBA sends us that information, then we're gonna have to always look at those first because that is priority. And that is what happened this time, is there was a lot of things that were sent to us that we did have to change because there were some laws that were changed. So with that, we're gonna do the review cycle. A couple of things that we did do, that it is a law that we have to have in every building, In God We Trust. That does not have to be a policy, that's just a law that's made, that's gonna go in every single school building. Dr. Johnson has made the decision that that's gonna go in the same place in every single building. It's gonna be placed in the office. In the offices, I think that's what you decided.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think that's about all I have right now, not unless anybody has any questions for me in regards to policy or any changes that have come forward that you noticed from TSBA.
I did have a question, perhaps even a suggestion around a policy. When I was at the TSBA law class recently, the policy around corporal punishment was brought up, and I have a number of constituents that have asked me over the last 2 years to suggest that we review corporal punishment. And so I wanted to ask that this committee look at establishing a policy around corporal punishment. I think right now our current policy or lack of policy is very vague. It's not very black and white. In fact, I don't think there actually is anything around corporal punishment, and I think by state law we have to have something within our policy around that. So anyways, I'm open for dialogue on that.
We have something.
We have
something. Okay.
You have to.
Yeah,
Well, the way that I'm understanding it now is that it's actually very vague. It's not a very direct policy. So I don't know, like, Brian, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, so I talked to Scott about this when I think when I first got here, just asking for clarity around it. And what Scott, the way the policy is written, not the corporal punishment policy, but the code of conduct policy allows the board is given the authority to address the code, within the code of conduct, have the ability to, address areas within there. So we have addressed it, although it's not black and white, we have addressed it with schools in regards to their expectations around corporal punishment, and everybody's been pretty clear on that. But as far as the board decided to do something with policy, that's something that, I leave to you all to decide and determine whether or not, how clearly you want to define the district stance on corporal punishment.
Kathy, I had a question, if you don't mind. Will you explain one more time, talk to me about the issue dates of policies and were you talking about how that affects implementation of the policy, or when you talk about reviewing the policy for possible change?
That's a good question. if you will, the issue dates, and Sherry just informed me that the issue dates that are listed on the website are wrong. The issue dates for the policies, if you look on the website, most of them are 04, 06, 07, but then if you look at the policy, the issue date, some of them don't even have an issue date. And I did call Scott about this, and Scott said that he actually was not 100% clear on what that was. He said that the first time that it's issued, that we put that issue date on there. Then when you, then when you look at it again, and then Kia, you may help me with this because I think we had that conversation. When we look at it for if the law changes, if there's a change of law, then we have to make, change the policy. And then that's when we rescind, that's when we have to put the new date on there.
I think that's the question mark. So if you look in your board packet in the set of policies that we provided, I'm looking at the criminal record checks. There's a header, and in the header, there's a descriptor code, and then there's a box that says issued date, issued past tense, and then right below it, there's a box that just says issued, colon, and then there's a box that says rescind. So what we have found that some policies have a date in issue date and not in issue. Other policies have a date in issued but not an issue date, and then there are some policies that have neither. So we don't know what.
So you think that's more of a clerical type thing?
I
or?
think it's a technicality
Okay.
or cleanup. And so
Right.
Scott, what we put the question to Scott is that, can we just do that kind of cleanup without it being an amendment? We just need to go back, fill in the numbers, and then we should decide for practice from now forward and document how we're using each of those boxes. So if issue date is the original date, like when the policy comes into creation, then we can say that every time we revise, that we change the issue with no date after it, and that be the date of revision, so that we know that's the date of revision. And then rescinds is only for when we actually retire a policy. So either the policy becomes irrelevant because of a change to statute, or the board might decide this actually is a procedure and we don't want to capture this as a board policy, and then the rescinds date would be that we literally retired or replaced that policy, and that name and that policy goes out of force.
In terms of the format, is it possible for us to change some of the language in that? Like, I mean, could we use date of revision so that everybody's clear that, you know what I mean?
I would
about
want
that.
to, and I think I leave it to Scott to say, I would hope that would just be a clerical change that we can make wholesale, and that we don't have to bring literally everyone in front of you guys to make that change. But I think that would be more clear.
Right, because I guess what I'm thinking is, so if everybody here at this moment in time knows what those boxes mean, but yet the language is not very clear in 10, 15 years from now, when, you know, if no one on this board is here anymore, what do those boxes mean, you know, or when we're revisiting that when the language is not real clear in the format. So, okay, thank you.
So, just to clarify, there's some policies that come before tonight, and then Scott, McKidd, Kathy, I know we're back and forth, myself, on some policies that will probably come forward in say April, taking us backwards in August, based on legislation and updates that are there. And so you've got before you the TSBA, and we'll continue to move forward with the worksheet, timeline that will be created.
I have a question about policy. Well, about a policy to look at, or not even to look at, to create. We have at Red Bank established a community school model there. We are implementing that in 4 other schools. I have been reading some other areas in the country that have the community schools model in place. They actually have a policy, a board policy for that. I would like for us to look into actually creating a board policy for the community schools model. My reasoning for that is this. with every, leadership team, if that team was to transition off, who's to say they would keep the community schools model? But if it's a policy and it's working for our system, then it's theirs to say. And I know people are looking at me like, what does that mean? But I mean, I've seen that happen in places where people implement things, and then when they leave, that leaves with them because the next person who picks it up doesn't want to do it. And I would hate for that to be the case for this particular situation, because I do think this is gonna be a great and viable opportunity for our kids. Since I'd like to see some type of policy in place, just an overall positive, that's something that we do here in Hamilton County, that makes sense. And I have some examples.
That'd be great. So we can bring that back for our first meeting in August. We'll work with, board member Lennon to work on bringing something available for you all to review in August.
A policy on community schools.
I'm not, what kind of jurisdiction do we have over that? I mean, I know
It's not a jurisdiction, it's not necessarily,
I
it's,
mean, cause these are like our laws, and I'm just wondering legally,
Right.
what kind of.
We can ask Scott that question.
Because, I mean, there's gonna be just a whole lot of people, this is one thing that's always worried me about the community school concept is fine, but we don't have any way of really knowing who everybody is who comes in to these.
that's not what the policy looks like though.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I'm just wondering if we start making rules and stuff.
I understand.
Yeah, I just, you know, there's one of those things, if you know, when you went to TSBA, this is don't tie your hands, so you get yourself in more trouble than you can get out of if you make rules that you can't enforce. And, like I say, legally, we might need to talk to Scott, what kind of legal jurisdiction do we have over community schools? Because there are a lot of people coming and going in these schools at night that haven't had background checks, haven't had a lot of things. And so that's troublesome for me, but that's another show for another day. But, we need to really find out that.
So I'll email Scott what I have, so he can see what the other people are doing in North Carolina and Boston and some other places. And then he can tell us from there what our jurisdiction is, right? And if that works, then he can get with you all about it.
And sometimes the policy, like, last year we saw, I think it was April of 2017, the board adopted a work-based learning policy. And it didn't mandate that every school have a work-based learning program. It was really more of a very general statement of support for work-based learning and defining what that means for common language. That was the way I interpreted it. So we could have something that's less prescriptive.
And that's what I was saying, but I just wanted something to go on record that we support this model if it's viable. And it's the same concept. I'm not saying that we mandate every school to have one, because every school doesn't have to have one. It looks different for everybody. And it might not be that for anyone, but I just would like for us to have something in place, because for those schools where it is going to be beneficial, I don't want it to see it disappear if leadership changes.
Carissa, did you see if Knoxville or Metro Nashville had anything about?
I didn't look at Knox. I know Knoxville does, their model is a little bit more CIS than just the model itself. And so that there's a little difference there. The communities in schools versus the community school, just the concept. I think the concept kind of gives you a broader range to just support the model, but not necessarily mandate things.
Yeah.
So I did look there. I will look for Nashville, but I have a couple of different policies that I don't mind to share with people, just to kind of, so they can get an idea of what I just want, that's just something I wanted to put out there.
Agree.
But yeah, see, on this criminal records check, just because we've gotten into some high weeds with this in the past year or so, on our application for employment for Hamilton County, it says, have you ever been arrested for a felony? I don't think that's a fair question, because I happen to know personally 2 or 3 people who have been arrested for felonies and who were absolutely innocent. And so that got us in trouble with a bus driver, you know, who was arrested for a felony, and since they weren't convicted or anything, you know, they didn't put it down, but yes, they were arrested. Then you have to go into this long, I mean, that's just almost like being punished for something you never did twice. So I don't know, and like I said, I'm not real sure with the criminal records check how it goes in with our policy, but I'm just thinking about the application process. I think that might be, maybe if you've ever been convicted of a felony, is a better way to look at that, rather than have you ever been arrested, because all of us may have very well known somebody that's been arrested for something. You know, they arrest you and then when you go downtown and tell them about it, and then by then it's too late. So it's, that's just one of those things I think we need to We need to look at that.
Yeah, Penny, we're nodding, something we'll definitely look at and clean up.
May I say, on this matter, Kat, Ms. Lynn? I have not probably looked as extensively as Creeksa has, but I've looked at Knoxville's, and I spoke to one of the board members in Knox County about how they did it, and she was very informative. But one thing they do, Ronnie, they do have criminal checks and background checks on people that come in because they said because of the liability that would come to the board and the system, and so they do that. And I'm sure we're doing the same thing. The Red Bank would do it and all the others, but I know Knox County does that as well.
Well, I know that for a fact, we've allowed some people into our schools to video classrooms and stuff like that who have not had background checks that were members of certain organizations that we kind of have carte blanche to whatever they want to do. So that's another thing that's very troublesome to me. It's going to have to be equal all the way across the board. If we allow people in to video our students and stuff like that, they're all going to have background checks. Certain people are going to have to, all groups are going to have to.
Anything else?
I still have a question about the, I had a question brought to me about the corporal punishment that I'm not clear about. On the application form, on the online application form, that a parent brought to my attention that they had to address that they have to circle that their child, and I haven't looked at it because I don't have a child in Hamilton County Schools, but they have to check a box that their child will have corporal punishment. I don't know because I haven't looked at it, but they can.
Go ahead.
Yes.
So you check a box that you've read the corporal punishment, our code of conduct.
Okay.
And as the superintendent has said earlier, we have to address corporal punishment because it is allowable in the state of Tennessee. We are revisiting our code of conduct, but online you're checking a box indicating that you have read our Hamilton County's code of conduct.
Okay.
And I think she probably said previously she had scratched, there was a paper copy.
Right.
You could scratch out
And
or
say
whatever
that they do
what
not.
you didn't agree. It didn't mean that you didn't agree because the signature indicates that you have been informed of Hamilton County's code of conduct.
Okay. And my understanding is, Dr. Johnson, you have made it perfectly clear that you do not support corporal punishment.
Yes.
So my question is then, if we don't support, or if you don't support corporal punishment, why don't we write that into our policy?
It would be an administrative statement. I mean, it'd be up to him. He could,
Well,
I'll be quiet.
No, the board, you all set the policy, like I wouldn't set the policy.
Right. It would be our job to set the policy for the administration to follow as operations. Correct? Like our policy dictates
Mr. Bennett?
that process.
The school board has the authority to prohibit corporal punishment or to establish the rules and regulations governing corporal punishment. The administration can dictate under what circumstances it feels that within the board's purview, to the extent you give him discretion, that's the best way to put it, to the extent that you give your superintendent discretion, he can push those rules down to his principals. So as if, for instance, if the board prohibited corporal punishment, then that would be the end of the story. If the board said corporal punishment were authorized for quote-unquote serious offenses, it would be for him to determine what that means. So right now, the board, because of its silence, has
Pass approval.
Correct, that's exactly right. So state law is what controls, and so right now the administration within the ambit of state law. So the chairman's statement is spot on correct. In Hamilton County, it's really an administrative decision, but the board could choose to occupy that field.
Right. And so, but if the superintendent's policy to his employees is that he does not support corporal punishment, then it makes sense that if there's a majority support of taking a stance that we're against corporal punishment, then it makes sense for us to write a policy stating that.
That's a policy decision for the board.
Okay, well, I am suggesting that we review it as a board and that we look at whether or not there is support on this board to eliminate corporal punishment within our school system.
Ready? I think this is something we need to talk to principals and stuff about. I know that I've talked to Dr. Johnson about this before, I know his feelings about it, but he may not always be our superintendent. So if we make a policy, we have to go back in and change the policy. I think that, and I think you've pretty much made it clear to the principals how you feel about it. I mean, they work for you. Here again, this is one of those things I don't want to get so tied up in a policy if we get so, and I'd like to talk to the principals about how they feel about it. We're not in the classroom, we don't know. I think we're taking an arrow out of the quiver of these principals. The number one reason that teachers get out of the teaching profession is behavior in the classroom. And I mean, you take everything that they have away from them, you know, we're gonna hit you with a wet noodle. I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, what do they have left? And I'm not because I haven't known anybody that's been paddled in years. Maybe I know some schools do, but that's up to that principal in that school because they know their students. And I don't think anybody intends anything other than this. I don't look at it as being beaten or anything like that. I mean, I swatted my 4-year-olds behind before I left the beauty shop just a few minutes ago. And, you know, I did it twice. I did it hard once. So, you know, and I don't beat her, I love her better than anything. But I want her to behave. And I think we need to talk to the principals about this. I mean, it's easy for us to sit up here and say, I mean, I can't even keep a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old in line. So, you know, I think it's something that just the board saying, well, we're against it, this is the way it's going to be. Let's give us some discussion from people that are in the trenches.
I mean, I think it's a good idea to get some input.
I don't disagree, but I do think that by leaving this policy like gray, then we're opening ourselves up for liability and potentially lawsuits. But also, as a parent, nope. I mean, yeah, but I have so many parents coming to me saying that. I know, I hear you, but I just don't think that this is solely a principal decision.
Every parent has that discretion to tell the principal, you are not to spank my child. And by the same tokens, you have some single moms that would welcome a principal being able to spank their child. I mean, that's easy for us with 2-parent homes and all this to say these kinds of things. Maybe you feel that way, and that's fine. Every parent has the right to tell the principal not to do that, and the principal says, okay, if you can't paddle them, we're going to expel them. Well, you don't want them expelled either. So, you know, what is left for them to do? You know, then you get into that gray area, you have these kids that disrupt the learning experience. I mean, that's what we're about, is education. They're interrupting the educational experience for everyone in that classroom.
And I just don't think that it's a principal's job to, I'm sorry, I know that this is like the way it's been done for decades, but I don't feel that way. I'm a different generation of parents, and it has nothing to do with 2-parent households. My mom was single my entire life, and she would have never allowed someone to spank me at school or my brother or my sister. But my point is that for the board to go silent on this and to not discuss it is a detriment to our community, because this is a very real topic in my district. I can't say that it is for everyone's district, but a lot of times people view corporal punishment as something that is definitely projected onto Black children, and it's a very hot topic in my district.
My mic is on. So I think what we have to do in looking at this situation is we're all going to have a different perspective on it personally. And I think what we have to do and remember in this position, in this role, and as it relates to this topic, that we have to step outside of ourselves and what our personal opinions are, and we do have to listen to the community and the constituents to see what they would like. We also do have to talk to those people that are boots on the ground and directly in the classrooms and in the buildings as well. I mean, also, we have to look at what that would look like if we want to include maybe some restorative justice things. I mean, you have to, it's a gamut of things that you could do there. So I do think maybe it's nothing wrong with the discussion. I mean, I'm open to the discussion and looking at whatever's going to be best for the district overall. I do think that Dr. Johnson's stance on it probably could be 8 other people's on this board stance and people in the audience as well, but it's our stance. It's not necessarily a policy for us to say, per se. We have to figure out what that looks like for the best of everybody involved. And I'm saying that we're just trying to make sure that we take the blinders off and look at everything and have everybody at the table that is a part of this, because currently, I know it is murky, and I really don't do a lot of murky, but it does allow, people or parents to do the written statement or the written permission. And yes, we probably should look at that and maybe try to get some more definitive properties to that or what that looks like. But I think there's a whole lot of ways that you can look at this. And so we just want to make sure that we don't just maybe look at, I mean, we're going to have to address corporal punishment state law-wise, but we may need to look at our policy to be a little broader to address some other things, if that makes sense. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Tiffany, as a parent, and I understand what your experience was. I got paddled by Mr. Swafford in football in first grade, and I survived. But I never got paddled again. I'm just saying, I just threw that out there though. Just the same background, two different parents. Sure. Right, because my mom's the same parent too. So I think you just have to think about that. But I also got spanked for people at church and other places. So I mean, the village will be, so it's okay. But I do think we have to just look at the gamut of things and what that looks like, and most importantly, bring everybody to the table, because yes, we do set the policy, and yes, we do want to be on the forefront of things for liability purposes, but I think we should hear from the teachers and the principals, as well as the parents and whomever else may be involved, just to see what that looks like, just to have the discussion as we bridge into the policy.
And the way that I've understood it is that Kathy asked for us to state what we would like to discuss, and so I am 100% on the same page with you and Rhonda and having a discussion. But again, like Kathy said earlier, it's our job to set policy. And when we leave policy so wide open as what I feel this current policy is, then we're kind of missing our job on building policy and making sure that it's narrow enough to where it's being followed correctly, or we're doing the things that it's supposed to do. So I fully agree with having discussions and bringing everyone to the table that should be there, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, we have to set the policy, but I just think you don't want to set it, because we kind of did that a little bit. I just don't want another Uruguay experience with the whole band thing. I'm just saying, we just got to look at it a little differently.
If I may suggest, I think we obviously need to delve with this. We need to look at it. We need to bring in people that of interest, but bring in maybe some parents, principals, teachers, get some input. And Mrs. Linden is our active policy chair, and we can have, I would suggest having a separate meeting away from the board day, when we're doing other business, when we can sit down and discuss it at your discretion, ma'am. And I personally would prefer it to be after August 2nd. But I will follow your discretion on that.
We're going to do it on August 2nd, right?
I think it's worth noting that Carissa said she got paddled. Carissa, I never got paddled. Just
Well,
wait.
Rhonda, in Mr. Swaller's defense, it was in my hand. It wasn't my bottom. It was in my hand with this little Mr. Do-Right, and it was like 1, 2, 3, and give it down to that portable and learn.
Let me just say, I'll take it one step further, Ms. Carter. There's no experience on earth like teaching and working with someone who's paddled you.
Mr. Sermon, I know a couple of teachers at Red Bank that said they sure considered it with you a few times.
I'm concerned because Carissa's getting slapped around at church.
Not at church, but if I was out of line,
Okay.
better ride for a child.
Better than Ron.
Okay. If I may, we'd like to ask Dr. Johnson to discuss the Future Ready Institute now.
Yes, so this is actually the plan before. Just very briefly, just a couple of updates to it that we got. I don't know if I put it on, put it on. I'm not doing something right, so. You can click the
All that stuff's getting old.
all that
Why don't
stuff.
you quit buying those cheap batteries, guys?
That's probably the problem.
Not to use them, not use it, mark it down, mark it down. All right, good deal. All right, so just kind of going through this, obviously you've seen all this several times. I want to make sure to highlight your mission and vision that you've directed as a board. The goals that you established are what moves us forward. There are 5 really big areas that we're focused on. One is obviously the acceleration of student achievement, and we'll share our district here just a little bit. Future ready students. great teachers and leaders, all this you've seen, and an engaged community and efficient and effective operations. And so our goal was to build on a plan that had been developed and to get a little more granular with action steps and key performance indicators for those areas. So 5 really big focus areas that we have is that at least half of all third grade students will be on track or mastered in TN Ready English Language Arts, the third grade TN Language Arts assessment. And so I think you'll see, and I'll point to the TN Ready, the new standards and the new assessment are much more rigorous. Baselines have been reset. I mean, it just is it's a different test, a different set of expectations for students. I say that we want to double the percentage of students that are on track in Algebra 1 across all grades. 9th grade Algebra 1 is always an indicator, an area that we as a district and candidly across the state has to be focused on. 75% of our graduates, we want them to complete at least one advanced course or industry certification exam. It's funny because Dave Teshman sent me an article link, and several of you have, on jobs that are left unfilled. But we know, remember that graph, that graphic that we saw, you may not remember, but that over 70% of our students that took a post-secondary opportunity, dual enrollment, dual credit AP course, went on to post-secondary. So we know that our students, when they get that opportunity to experience that success, or those advanced courses, or sit for those certifications, is good. Then we want to move the average ACT composite for the class of 2023 to 21. So we know that's a broad goal and bold goal for us. Then 90% of all students that enter high school in the 2019 cohort, when they graduate by the summer of 2023, we want them to be graduates. So moving that graduation number, which is roughly 84%, up towards 90%, or our 5 big areas of focus. Real briefly, just some baselines on the focus 5 areas. And this is an example, obviously, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute. As data evolves throughout the course, data rolls in over the course of the next month or two, like graduation rate, for instance. We won't get that until later, October-ish, usually September, October. ACT, those types of things that kind of rolls in, growth will roll in. But as we get that information, we'll update the 2018 baseline. But what we really have work to do is to set targets year over year and to report to you over the course of the year how we're performing within these 5 areas, to give you updates on what's being done, to also address really next steps that we have, and any data information that we have. And you've got the comprehensive document, which gets down into the very granular KPIs, key performance indicators within each area. This is just a snapshot of the annual performance summary. Again, just reiterating what was said. You see us work to move that target every single year as we work towards that goal of becoming the fastest improving and moving really the work forward. The number of schools at the bottom meeting the annual growth standard for TVAS composite. You see we want to grow students as well as move achievement really across the board in all areas. As we get the final, all the baseline numbers, we'll update these numbers. These numbers aren't all final, in particular TVAS, and we'll share achievement here today. So just the importance of a plan. Obviously, you as a board have set a clear mission and vision for us, and when there's a clear district plan of action, which we feel this will provide, the schools at the school level, they're working through action plans right now. But when there's a really clear focus, we know that students can and will be successful. And so that is the purpose of this plan. Just some feedback that we received and some revisions. Gathered feedback from principals, sent the document out to all of the principals to get feedback. I think that we talked about in the policy conversation. Feedback is critical to us. Also, our parent advisory group. You all have seen it as a board. Our teacher advisory group. And so here are some of the changes. Just a few suggestions. There were some grammatical things, but here are some suggestions that we incorporated. An action step that's focused on evidence-based decision-making and accelerated student achievement. One of the things that really is important to us and me as a superintendent, as your superintendent, and really is something that I always work to project, is we are we're a learning district. We're a district that's a growth mindset focused district, and we want to learn from the best. We want to become better because of our learning from what we've seen around us regionally, locally, nationally, and so those things are very important to us. And so obviously our research and accountability team will continue to dig into this and to find out who is absolutely outperforming us and what is it that they're doing and how might we learn from that to improve as a system in every area of our organization, whether it be the academic side of the house or the operations side of the house or the recruitment and retention side of the house. We want to get better in all areas. And then we obviously, even before I got here, the STOMP was a program that all of you know about. It's just great as we talk about that work-based experience and internships and externships for students. And students, not every student is going to college, and that is okay. And we want students to reach their highest and best potential. I will tell you, I have friends that didn't write near the papers that I wrote that make more money than I make, and that is okay. So how do we expose students in an intentional way? Just having the opportunity to go to the STOMP, several members of our team visited maybe in the fall, late fall, with John Maynard, and seeing students right here across the street that are at work, earning a wage, spending a part of their day having the opportunity to obviously go to school and take courses online, and then finish their graduation. We know that's important, so we want to expand that program. We're going to call it Future Ready Now, but we want our students to that are in that situation to experience it. And one young man that we spoke to there at the STOMP, he is the breadwinner. He is the number one earner of finances for that family, and what would have possibly pulled him out of school was the need to earn a living. And so he's earning a living and getting his education and also getting some work-based experience. And I believe he became or is already a full-time employee there. And so that's what you want. And so we want to look how to expand those opportunities for our students. And I want to speak to this real briefly. A part of that, when we talk about moving that graduation rate, some of those students that are lost in that graduation rate are students that, have already identified, I have no desire for college, I have no desire for whatever the case may be. And so how do we really dig into this area and engage our great companies that we have here and businesses that need an employee in the workforce and really go deeper with that. And then under engaged community, one of the things that we know and understand is that only 4 out of every 10 students that enter kindergarten in our system are ready to learn. And so I think it's been said across this board multiple times, we know what we can do from the standpoint of K through 12. We feel real strong pre-K through 12 oftentimes. But how do we make sure that students arrive to us ready? And so that's an engaged community component. We want our parents to understand that there's a dual responsibility, and our community supporters understand there's a dual responsibility from the context of preparing a student for entry into kindergarten. And so we want to move that number. When you look at that 4 out of 10 students that enter kindergarten ready, that number really almost to a T matches our proficiency rates as you go through grade bands in our system. And so it's not by chance that achievement number is where it is. So just a couple of points. It's a living document. We'll continue to monitor and refine, and we know we've set some fairly bold targets, but then also we feel like that's the right thing to do for children. But we also understand that there may be times and moments in which we don't meet those targets. And our responsibility, we feel like as a team, to you as a board, is to make sure that we tell you where we are. And if we haven't gotten to where we need to be telling you what it is we're doing to move the work forward. And so we want to do that. And also, we want the public to understand and know where it is we desire to head as a system. E-plan is something that all of our district has to do and our schools do, and those will be finalized at the end of August. Just briefly, some next step, we'll ask for your approval and support of the plan this evening. School level action plans are in, right, Justin? And I see Larry and Larry in. They turned them in a few days ago, and feedback in the feedback stage right now of just supporting principals with that. Several data review days. Nakia, Shannon, and that team will be spending time with principals, making sure they understand their school-wide data and how they can work with their individual students to move their work forward. Really excited about really strengthening the pre-K through 12, K through 12 experience for students and their learning communities. And so 5 of those, including the Opportunity Zone, which we feel like is going to allow us to support students and parents and teachers and leaders in a better way. Stephanie and her team did a lot of work with instructional coaching, making sure we're maximizing the coaches that we have. And then you'll hear more as we talk about clear learning targets and really making sure that students know what it is that the teacher wants them to know and be able to do at the end of the lesson. So are there any questions at this time?
Board, any questions? If not, then I've got one brief statement to make, and then we'll end the work session. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have the achievement data. Dr. Johnson, achievement data, please.
Well, you're gonna make the same.
After. I'll do that after. Perfect.
All right. So we'll ask I think Justin and Jill to come up and share the state released today. District and state. I'm sorry. Here it goes. District and state achievement data. So we want to share with you where we are as a district, and obviously know this is a baseline year. Definitely some areas that we see that are positive, and definitely some areas we know that we have work to do. So I'll turn it over to Jill.
So just as a reminder, our goal is to become fastest improving district in Tennessee, and I think we're on our way. So some of the data that came back today points to that. So that's exciting. My job, though, is to share the state overview with you and share how things kind of turned out statewide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Justin to zoom in on Hamilton County. So this is just really bullet points from the commissioner. Tennessee Ready scores showed mixed results. Students across the state improved most in early grades reading, and some subgroups narrowed their achievement gaps. There were gains also in English language arts for elementary and also in high school math. So again, that's statewide. Statewide in middle school, all subjects showed a decline. That's across the state. Additionally, students across the board saw declines in science, which reinforces the need to support teachers as we transition to new standards in the state. Almost all districts in the state increased proficiency in at least one content area or grade band, but only 20% of districts improved in a majority of subjects and grades. And just as a reminder, if you're looking for social studies data, that won't be out until later this fall, as they have to create cut scores because it's a new test. So we only have English, math, and science data at this point. Just as a reminder as well, this is the last year of the current science standards. So there will be this big transition to new standards. Next spring, the new science test will be field tested. So we actually won't have science data next school year that's included in the accountability. It's kind of a year to adjust to new standards. Any questions about the state trends in general? Okay. Oh, Joe?
Just quickly, and I may just be ignorant making this statement, but how closely can we take the results that we have, and is it? I guess what I'm asking, how valid is the data compared to some of the testing mishaps that we've had? I mean, how do we know what's valid and what's not valid?
Yeah, we didn't actually include all of their bullet points, but I think when you read the commissioner's release, you'll see that they contracted with a company to look at the issues and then the impact on testing, right, and the general consensus, well, I shouldn't say consensus, the opinion from the state, and of that contractor was that there was a minimal impact on test results.
Okay. Which I mean, I can't argue with that, because I don't know, I was
Well,
an advocate.
I think to your point, so we obviously know there's some legislation and things that happened that gave, you know, teachers and schools districts some provision, so to speak, to, with this year's assessment. But the reality of the assessment, it's a learning tool, so what we do with it, what we will do with it is internalize it, use it as an informational tool to guide our work, you know, going forward. You know, I think everybody in the state, you know, had the same set of issues, and so we will definitely use it. You know, the data is useful from the standpoint of planning and preparing and knowing where we are and figuring out what adjustments might need to be made and seeing, you know, how we look comparatively to other districts and how quickly or lack thereof we're moving in content areas, subject areas, and grade bands. So it's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say, the testing data, I think Dr. Johnson made a very valid point. It's useful for study and for growth, and it is not the Talmud, it's not the Quran, it's not the Bhagavad Gita, it's not the Holy Bible. They're not perfect and pure, and I'm trying not to lay about any particular religious holy book, but I'm saying they're not perfect, and I think Dr. Johnson hit the nail on the head when he said they're good for assessing and helping improve where we are and see what we're doing. I think we need to take it. It's not an end all. I think the state legislature took it. It's not an end all. So,
Dr. Highlander, just a quick question. Jill, if this is the last year for those standards, and we're going to start new standards next year, when you guys look at those focused performance areas and you're establishing that baseline, I mean, how will you be able to do that not knowing what those standards are going to be?
So we know what the standards will be for science. I mean, basically there are different standards, but also they've kind of reframed them so different things are taught in different grades, because that's the easiest way I can explain that. So really, that first year of the field test, we'll get some type of baseline sense of, you know, what that test will be like. And then we'll get real data the following year, and that will be our baseline data for science, and then we'll go from there. So there is sort of that gap. You know, the testing kind of follows a little bit later as you're adjusting to new standards. So that's a good question. Does that help to?
Clear as mud.
Okay, Justin's going to talk about how our data compares with the state.
So here's a quick chart that'll help bring in focus our comparison to the state. So a couple of things to point out. If you look at the gray shaded areas, those are subject areas that we narrowed the gap between our performance and the state. So I'll walk you through the first line. If you look at the first line, you'll obviously see the first column is the year, and then the grade band, 3rd through 5th, the subject, and then where our students are performing at 34.5 on track or mastered, and then the state at 35.7. So you'll notice that that was a 2.3 percentage point gain for us. The state gained about 1.8, and so we've narrowed that gap for 3 through 5 ELA. Mr. Smith, I think, kind of point out to bring in science, that question about standards. You'll notice science is a little bit higher than most of our other areas, and that's because it's an old test and old standards, and you'll see a correction with that in a couple of years when the standards and the tests come on. But I think that sometimes people look at science as being a little bit higher and wondering what we're doing. It's kind of comparing apples and oranges at this point, comparing ELA to science. But we noticed a couple things here. Again, one positive is that we are closing or narrowing the gap in several areas. We do notice a couple things that we're going to dig deeper into, a couple of areas of concern. If you look at high school ELA, there was an emphasized focus on writing this year that we're not quite sure that we communicated the best that we could have, and want to ensure that we correct that, to ensure that teachers and principals understand how important writing is. And again, also if you look at 11th grade U.S. history, in that you'll see there's some concern there. And again, wondering if the emphasis on writing is something that we need to go back in and look. So we're going to dig deeper there, a couple of different areas. But again, I think the overall thing to take here, of course, we're not where we want to be, but we are narrowing the gap between us and the state in 6 out of 10 categories. Can we start?
I was just gonna, well, that was a question I was gonna ask you before you started through all of the grade levels and obviously the different subjects, why you guys thought history was where it was, but I mean, it makes sense if the assessment instrument is asking for written answers, maybe an essay and after some reading, I mean, then yeah, it would kind of fall in line maybe with some of the English scores too. So.
And that's a little bit of speculation. We've got really 10,000-foot overview of district data. We don't have anything on kids yet, so when that comes in, we'll start looking at that and digging deeper into it. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, well, just I was checking what you said, that traditionally speaking, U.S. history trails are tightly coupled with ELA, in particular with the writing component. So definitely an area that we'll dig into. Obviously hired Rachel towards in the first semester at some point, and so she's already they're busy with training. I've seen some things from her, and then the new science standards. I just want to mention that there's been training that has been going on all summer long around the new science standards, and I asked a few teachers the other day. They were working on curriculum guides, so I bumped into them 2 times. Once at Hickson Middle, and the other time at West 40th. When I was out at Hickson Middle, the group of teachers that were going through the training were sharing with me that they liked these standards. They felt much better overall about the standards, but it's just like with anything new, you got to learn. And so this year will be a field test year, and then we'll learn from it and build.
Now,
yes. I tell you what, I'm blown away. You can make all the excuses you want to for this thing in U.S. history. This is. And having sat on this board as long as I have and seen how much money we've pumped into everything to make excuses for everything, this is what I'm talking about. Then you come in and see this kind of grade here for history. You blame it on the reading. Then you blame reading on something else, and it's always blame on something else. This is where we need a task force to find out how in the world we got to this point. Because even against the state, look how much better the state did than we did. I mean, this should concern everyone in this room, all the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars we put in to this school system, and this is where we are. And they didn't just get this way in high school. It had to be from middle school and from elementary school. Now, I'm just a hairdresser, but I got this figured out. I don't need to see all your data. To see that we have just see the grades in the schools and see which schools and see where they came from in elementary school and what's going on. I think that one of the worst things that we do is we're letting these kids out of the 3rd grade before they read on 3rd grade reading level, and some of these parents that even want their kids held back can't hold them back, and now they're behind in the 4th grade, and then they're behind in the 5th grade, they're behind in the 6th grade, and they're behind till they graduate. That's one of the worst things we've done on this board, is not have a summer school for some of these kids to get caught up. They were promoting these kids before they're ready to be promoted because of whatever reason, because it looks bad to the state. Well, if this don't look bad to the state, I don't know what does. I mean, I am just blown away. And like I say, I've heard every excuse there is to be had on every year. I hear a different excuse. Well, no, it's really the same excuse every year. I mean, I'm just astounded. And like I say, sitting on the board here, you give the people the tools. You keep saying, well, you have to give them the tools they need. You have to give them the tools. Well, we give millions and millions and tens of millions, and you have to give them what they need, and we give you what you need, and this is what we get.
So,
I am just blown away. I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, I do want to be clear. I don't think that anyone is more upset and concerned about this than we are, and I don't think that
I think if the public knew this, there'd be a whole lot more people more upset than you are, because knowing what the people make, they're supposed to be taking care of this situation right here, and the hundreds of this is a $400 million business that we can't teach kids to write in the 3rd grade. I mean, I'm sorry, but I am just over the moon on this. I mean, we just kind of gloss over this stuff, you know, we talk about little fluffy stuff on the school board. This right here is where the rubber meets the road, right here. And we are doing a dismal job.
So let me point to a few things on here. So one, and I'll just be very candid, we started in late July. And you don't, school planning for academics begins in January. It really begins before that, but you start your plans for curriculum mapping and where you're heading in January. The other thing we'll point to is, I think when you look at the performance this year, even amidst all that, you see the gaps closing. And Ron, to your point, this is this is not, I know where the state wants to be, this is not where the district wants to be, but you see more areas than not, their declines are more significant than ours are, and some very significant. You also see percentages shrinking, and so in regards to us moving, in front of the state in some areas, obviously 3 through 5 math and high school ELA, which is a neutral, but we still want to, and I've said this from day one, we want to outpace the state in every area, and it's been this way for years. You're exactly right. I'm not used to it, and so we are working to address it. But this is a good starting point from the context of the gap is closing. The gap between us and the state in a lot of areas, we see movement, and so we see closure. And so, I think you look at this, you look at the state, and there's declines in almost every area. And so it's obviously a statewide. It's not a isolated to Hamilton County issue. It's a statewide issue. The district has been behind the state for years. For the last several years. And so that is not okay by our team. That's not okay for us. And so we are working urgently. And this is a step in 6 out of the 10 areas, with one of them being neutral. The gap is closing. So our decline, as the state declined 2 or 3, we got 0.8. So it's a learning tool. I think that was said, and we acknowledge we're not where we want to be, and we'll continue to work in that way. I think there's some key messages within here that we'll transition into.
Yeah, I think I should add, here's the good news. Where have we focused the most energy in this district in the last 2 years instructionally? Literacy, right? That's where we really have put our resources, our money, our coaching, our time, our talent into literacy. We outpaced the state. We increased more than the state did in literacy this year. So we know when we put a focus somewhere, and we get everybody on board with some common, some non-negotiables, and we provide the support to teachers, and we provide the instructional resources that we can make gains. Last year, we also increased in literacy. Do you remember our value-added score in literacy last year? Kathy, do you remember? You're not. It was a 5, because that's where we really zeroed in. Now, are we there? No, we're at 34.3%, but we're closing in on the state. And now we want to beat the state. We beat the state in the growth of kids on track this year, or proficient as it was called before. So we can do this. We just have to make sure that we have a focus not just on literacy, but on math and on social studies and science as well. So there is encouraging data within this data, and I think that 2.3 and beating the state, which is at 1.8, that's a really good sign of the potential for growth in this district.
And I want to be real clear, make sure I point you to the very last column where you're looking at, how it just was a challenging year across the state and the rate of decline. But you'll see, and then you see our middle schools, an area in which we'll focus, which we'll get to the key message, 6 through 8. You see less of a decline and even some increase in ELA 6 through 8. That's 2.8, percent better than the state. So now you've gone from the state being at 33, 34, and us being at 30 to now you're 0.2% in achievement. So the gap it's moving in several areas, and that's not that's just what it is. The district didn't get to this point overnight, and we're not going to fix it overnight, but it is encouraging in the areas, and I promise you, in the areas where we see issues, we're working.
If anybody wants to know why people go to private school, we don't have to do all these studies and stuff. I'm just going to exhibit A out here. So just to let you know, and I know that we didn't get here overnight. We didn't get here, we've been getting here since 04, I was 04, and then before that, I have an article at home. I'm going to make everybody a copy back in 04. You know what our biggest problem was? Reading. Hello. I mean, I'm a hairdresser. I've got this one figured out. We're not teaching our kids to read K through 3. I mean, this is really a no-brainer. I mean, seriously.
Dr. Island? So again, I think that pointing this out as being a tool that we need to take and learn from. I mean, this is not where we want to be. We recognize that. We want to promote the positive gains that we're making and make sure that our teachers and our school leaders know that we appreciate the work they're doing. There are some positive stories here, and we want teachers and our leaders to know what those are. So here's again another slide that's showing.
Justin, I'm not blaming the teachers. I want you to understand that. I think they only do what they're told to do by the central office. And I'm not blaming these classroom teachers, I'm sorry.
I didn't imply that you were blaming anyone, just like you implied that I was making excuses. That's not what I was doing. We're using this as a learning tool to look at our U.S. history and to say, why didn't our U.S. history go down? We would be digging our head in the sand if we didn't do that. So just like I wasn't implying you weren't blaming the teachers, don't imply that I'm not taking this seriously.
They can't read. I'm not blaming you for that.
So, to again look at the improvement on the district, we've got 6 out of 10 areas that gap is narrowing, and it really speaks to the overall narrative. But if we're working to become the fastest improving district, we've got to make some steps, and it points to that. So, those point out the 6 areas. One thing at the bottom right, if you see the asterisk with science, that's just helping us remember science standards are changing. We're doing some work around standards, and again, that'll be a different test going forward. So, a couple key highlights that again have already come out. If you look at the 3 through 8 literacy, we've made some big improvements in 3 through 8 literacy over the past 2 years, and we saw those again, which is definitely promising. What we're going to do is take this and use it as a baseline. So if you look at the goals that are reflected in the Future Ready 2023 plan, they're going to be reflected in this. So those 5 key big indicators, half of all of our kids, hopefully by 3rd grade, will be able to read on, track, or master. Double the percent of Algebra 1, 75% kids taking advanced courses, ACT at a 21, and the 90% grad rate. That's all tied to this baseline. So we'll take this as we move forward in 2023 and really help that to drive our work. So again, we've mentioned most of these bullet points, so I won't go back into them, but I do want to point out the very last bullet. If you look down, the new curriculum guides for secondary ELA, it's going to include a greater emphasis on writing. We anticipate that that's going to move down to 6 through 8 as well, to where that emphasis on writing will be more involved in the overall score for 6 through 8 ELAs. We'll do some work in middle school this year as well to ensure that teachers are on track and ready for that change in that test. Again, a couple things. We're recognizing that we've got a lot of work to do. It's not a shock to us. We've got to focus especially on Algebra 1 in high school, not just because of the improvement that we're expecting to see there, but if you look at Algebra 1, it's a great indicator for graduation. If a kid comes in successful in 9th grade Algebra 1, pretty good chance that that student's going to be on track for graduating. So we want to make sure that we're putting some emphasis on that. Again, the second bullet points to that change in science standards. We will introduce some new instructional materials and make sure that they're aligned to those standards and that we're supporting teachers with the resources that we need. Last bullet again, just want to make sure that you're aware, Dr. Johnson mentioned planning since, that it needs to start taking place in January. If you remember, we talked about a reorganization in February to make sure that we're ready to move forward and that we can address this challenges. We've got everybody in place, and we feel really confident moving into this next year that we'll be able to support teachers and leaders to address these concerns and really get us to where we want to be as a district. Any other questions?
When will we have an opportunity to see the breakdown of these results by school?
So I think school level data should be coming back the 1st of August is that what I'm remembering? I think it's the 1st of August in August, and value added will follow shortly after that. It's an important reminder that we're looking at achievement data. This isn't the value added data.
Ms. Landon?
Okay, I was going to ask that question as well, but I also wanted to, I think these changes it's positive that we are moving in the right direction. Also with the changes that have been made with putting new leaders in our schools, I think even more changes, we're going to see changes in the coming year, as well as the focus on the middle school years. I think you're putting an emphasis, which I'm glad to see that we're putting that emphasis on the middle school years for this school year, which I think is going to even make a bigger difference for our scores for next year. So I mean, I think everything's in place to continue to make our scores improve, so, you know, I think you're moving in the right direction, thank you.
Just a few next steps based on the data. Lots of work this summer revising curriculum maps. So, you know, in order to be successful on these tests, teachers have to know what to teach. They have to be able to, you know, unpack and understand the standards, how to teach it, and also how those standards will be assessed. So the big step in that is revising these curriculum guides to make sure we're aligned with the state. We also are rolling out an initiative to all schools around clear learning targets. And I think Justin explained that last month, but as a reminder, we want parents, teachers, you know, principals to be able to go into school or a classroom and ask a student, what is your clear learning target today? And for students to be able to express to us what they should know and be able to do by the end of the class period. And so we want to get some uniformity around that across the district. Of course, supporting teachers as much as we can through professional learning, as much of that being job embedded at their schools as possible. Aligning our assessments with Tennessee Ready, making sure the benchmark assessments align with Tennessee Ready, and we've got some new ideas on that we're working on. We're really excited about the launch of the Future Ready Institutes, just some amazing opportunities for our kids, and I think we'll see increases because kids are more engaged in schools and they'll see this trajectory for their future to the workforce. Additionally, the work that will happen in middle schools around one-to-one technology, personalization, and student engagement. And the last slide. Over the next 2 weeks, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, I think there's one more slide. Deep data dives with every school so they can look at, okay, where do we make progress? Where do we need to focus for the coming year? And that data will be incorporated into each of the school's action plans. So that work is taking place, actually the first one of those meetings, I believe, is tomorrow morning. We as district leaders will help to principals and schools to refine those action plans and also think about, you know, what are those root cause analysis? Why are students not learning to read in certain areas, or why are students absent chronically, those types of things. We will continue to evaluate data, so keep in mind this is the first round of data, and then, you know, we get school level data, and then we get value added data, so you'll keep seeing data come out over the next couple of months. As I mentioned, social studies doesn't even come out until the fall, so you'll see this kind of pattern of data coming out. So as we do that, we'll continue to update you and make sure you're informed as each new round of data comes forward.
Thank you all very much. Ms. Lanning, you will probably maybe work with Mrs. Ford to poll us on when would be a good time for a policy meeting.
Yes, and I'll make that after August 2nd.
Thank you so much. If I may add, right now, I did want to ask, can I see a show of hands from the board members who all has attended the superintendent board relations training at one time or another? Okay, so most of us have. I think Mr. Wingate, I would strongly encourage those of us who have to work with Mr. Wingate on the committee for the superintendent's new instrument, because that particular training would be very helpful. So if you send information out, maybe you also poll when you want to meet for that. And I strongly encourage those, and the vast majority of the board has been to that training. But that would be helpful in there, don't you think, Dr. Johnson? So, somebody said, if no one else has anything, we'll take a brief recess until 5:30. I couldn't get there fast enough. Sorry, I sound like a joke.